Okay, welcome everybody. Good evening. This is Daniele Fiorentino, Director of the Department of Political Science at the Università Roma Tre, and actually I'm a scholar of the United States society and foreign policy, concentrating especially on the late 19th and first half of the 20th century. We are here today to speak for the Festival of Diplomacy. This is an annual event that in which Roma Tre has participated for many years, and it's always a pleasure for us to be part of this major big event that sees a lot of different roundtables, presentations like the one we are holding today, and other events, especially addressed, in our case, to students. Now, we don't have a large audience of students right now. I hope some will join us shortly, and this is made available also on the festival's platform, so it can be seen and it's visible for some time to come as a recorded event. Our title for today, it's a more inclusive international system. It's with the participation of some of the colleagues from different places, starting with Maria Chiara Malaguti, who teaches international law at the Catholic University of Sacro Cuore in Milan and Rome. Gordon LaForge, who is an independent scholar specializing in politics, governance, international organizations, and he's a teacher also in the Washington's campus of Thunderbird School of Global Management for Arizona University. And then we have Marilena Gala, who is a professor of the history of international relations, specializing mainly on security issues starting from the beginning of the Cold War, a professor in our Department of Political Science at the Università Roma Tre. So a pleasure, welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here and participate in this. I want to thank the organizers of the festival, with whom we have collaborated, as I just said, for many, many years. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to participate, collaborate, contribute to this event, and share, especially as I was saying before, with the students. We are touching upon a very important and relevant issue, and a touchy one, no doubt, that raises a lot of question marks, I would say. I mean, I have to tell you the truth, when I was given the title, I had more question marks than answers, because it's really hard to speak about a topic this big. I mean, a vast topic with so many different aspects attached to it. Are we living, this was the first question we raised when we started organizing this event with the festival. Are we truly living in a more inclusive international system? Well, the first answer that comes to mind is no, because we have just experienced, and we are still experiencing, a major crisis, which is testing our ability to be inclusive, our ability as partners in an international system, as actors in an international system. That is traditionally based on mutual relationships and relations between nations, and we have grown accustomed for many, many decades to a bipolar system and then a multipolar system. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the possible potential actors around the world are involved. A multipolar system can be also of some countries that, let's say, play the music, the major tune, with others that are somehow minor players in the game. And to a certain extent, the crisis ignited by COVID-19 and the following campaign, for example, for vaccines, has shown that this international system is not that inclusive after all. We are used to thinking that there are some major powers that really, create the context, dictate the rules, give basically the hint to what follows also in major international organizations. Now, we know that there are several international organizations that should play a major role in this sense, of course, starting with the United Nations, but along with them also the European Union, the European Commission, and other international organizations that can really play a role in this sense, but that don't seem to be able to to collaborate, first of all, among themselves, and then with other countries, especially countries in Africa, where we have seen a major imagination of the area, as well as in Asia, and to tell you the truth, as well as in Latin America to an extent. We always have, and we're still living in a world that, although is becoming more multipolar, is at the same time split between a north and a south that experience evidently different situations. And from this point of view, probably what is in need, and we were discussing this recently in a conference among Americanists, is that some of the major players, the major countries should design some kind of strategy, of grand strategy, in order to put their house in order first, let's put it this way, and then really contribute at the international level with some meaningful project that can involve the countries that so far have been marginalized. Can this be started with vaccination campaign that so far has not been as effective as expected, especially in the south of the world? Well, this could represent a great opportunity, but from what we have seen so far, this opportunity has not really been caught, although several countries, including some major European countries and the United States, have been promising, for example, the distribution of the vaccines for free, and possibly donating them to countries in the south, especially as far as Europe is concerned, to Africa. On the other hand, there are so many different actors now in this, in what used to be called the concert of nations. Now, we cannot speak of a concert of nations anymore, also because many of the international players are not nation states only anymore. We have several major players that play a different tune sometimes, and not necessarily one that is in tune with the others. But we could say that actually we need a definition of at least major lines, if not a grand strategy of foreign policy, also but from countries like Russia, China, India, and and the like. I mean, those world powers, but also regional powers that can really make the difference. And so far, from what I can tell, I don't see any meaningful change or let's say push toward a change, a major shift in international relations. There is still that competition that somehow seems to put us on the verge of a new Cold War, maybe this time fought between the United States and China rather than the Soviet Union and the United States of old, but that it's not really what the international community needs nowadays, because maybe we need something that has not even been invented yet, or that is in the making, a process that can really impress a major change to world politics and to the interaction between countries. and not only, and of countries with major international actors, such as the big companies, the big multinational companies, the social networks, and you name them. So I don't want to take too much time. My presentation was only by way of, introducing the issue and stimulating some thoughts. I would turn right away to Maria Chiara Malaguti, whom I briefly introduced earlier. She's also president of the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, or Common Law, UNIDROIT, and she has different, she's covered different offices also in the European Central Bank. I won't take more time. I'll turn to Professor Malaguti and thank her again for accepting to participate in this discussion today. Please, Maria Chiara.
Thank you, Professor Fiorentino. And you already put so many things into the debate that we could just start discussing what you said, in fact. But let me take, at least for this initial intervention, let me take what I can to the debate. As Professor Fiorentino was saying, I'm a professor of law, so I take the law perspective, and more than ever, I take the perspective of economic law, because indeed I'm president of UNIDRA. UNIDRA is unification of private and commercial laws. It is a way to see governance, And on the other side, I always studied investment law. So in all extent, all kind of consideration can make to you come from that way, that way of looking at things, And now, of course, one of the things that we were discussing among people, experts, let's say, in these fields, were the consequences and the challenges that the two crises, the one in 2006 and the current one, had taken to the concept of multilateralism and global governance. Now, and it is sure that, yes, it is not an inclusive world. It is a world where there are new patterns for what concerns the sustainable development goals. So there are some novelties in the approach in governance. There is a mixture between public and private. So we do see some changes, but these changes are really far from being consolidated one way or the other. And the other thing that is clear somehow is that multilateralism is in a crisis. It is in a crisis in the sense that you see much more regionalism going on, and you do see that the world is organizing, at least in economic, for the economic negotiation, in regions with different interests and sometimes with conflicts. So you do have a different landscape and some new things that are coming that could help in discussion. But what I wanted to tell you was, in fact, a number of different challenges that I see that were not directly connected with the crisis at all, but that show how the world was developing and how the international governance is developing, and to take into consideration, in my understanding, when we discuss whether how, or better, how we can get into a more inclusive world, or to use an expression that is used many times, especially in environmental law, whether we can build up a common house one way or the other. So let me just take some challenges and that I think we should take into consideration in this landscape. And then we can then discuss how we can possibly cope with them. And I'm also interested to see what the other contributors who do not work in the same field as me react to what I'm saying. So let me just take a list of points that I think are of interest. First of all, we are in an hyper-connected world. What does it mean? It means that our individual interests normally have to deal with or might be in conflict with the interest of someone else who's very far away from us. It's the fact that we are so interconnected. It means that we can quickly, especially again, I look at economic terms in the first place. We are, for instance, used to supply chains where you have many intermediaries in the chain, where each of them has a specific interest, and interests are normally dealt with at local level. I mean, my interests are normally combined or even conflicting sometimes with you. I mean, with people who live in my own community, in the place where we all pay taxes, but my interests, in fact, might be in conflict or in an event need to be coordinated with the interests of some other people that very far away from me. And again, the crisis showed that there is a role for that these supply chains and the way they work might affect the way we govern the world, and again, the way we address the issues of inclusiveness. Because, to be inclusive in this kind of articulation of interest might change the parameters that you normally use. I hope I'm saying things that are easy to you to understand, because again, I'm used to speak with people who study law, so sometimes I give for granted concept that might not be for some of you. So if there is any need for me to clarify what I mean, please tell me. But with hyperconnection, I also see mobility and the opposite of mobility. We are very quick in moving from one country to the other, but we are also very quick not to move, in fact, to pretend or to believe we are moving, while in fact we get in contact with people with no real need to move. I mean, from here I'm speaking, I see Gordon. Gordon is far away from me, but I'm not there, but I have a dialogue with him. I can open a conversation with him. This is somehow in conflict in the sense that you are quite easy in moving from one place to the other. On the other side, sometimes you believe that you are moving, but in fact you are really not communicating really, or you are not present and into the community where the other people are located one way or the other. In economic terms, that might be that not you as individuals, but companies can do forum shopping. Forum shopping means that you might put in competition countries in legal orders in the same way as you put in competition people, stores in the street where you live. You have a different way of understanding relationships beyond borders of your state normally. Third element, the disintermediation of things. I'm sure that here you understand very well. When you say blockchains or DTL, you speak of systems that do not have normally a center that can regulate them. In a platform, you have people that are located in many different places where they govern the platform from different places. The platform itself can move extremely quickly from one legal order to another legal order. So you never know where these people belong to. And again, you have an issue of living in a world, and this is probably the last point. You live in a world that is organized by states, but you have a reality that is not organized by state, and this is difficult to govern and control. So are we living in a common house? No, we are living in a condominium. We are living in a place where each of us has his own apartment, and you try to organize and to see how your neighbors can get into your apartment or not getting into your apartment, where you have common places where you share the things that you want to share. And the common interest at that point is only how to use the parking in your condominium, but there is really not a common house where we are all living together. To finish up with this, in order to study inclusion, as in order to study, in my understanding, any kind of governance for the future, you not only have to see how whether multilateralism is in a crisis, how it can change, whether it is okay the way it is, or what we save, what we don't save. But we also have to take into consideration that there are so many phenomena that are different, that change the parameters that you have to consider when you speak of governance. Now, I'm absolutely sure that what I told you is very different, I would say, from what possibly I imagine Gordon or Marilena will consider, But but I think we do need to put everything together to get to somehow solve the issue. What do we have to do to get a better world, a more inclusive world, a common house, or even simply how to solve all the challenges that we have now? I think I'm stopping here because the only thing I wanted to do at this point was to give you the perception of reality from the side of those who see at the economic context, at the global governance of economics, and all the kind of issues that we see in a world that needs somehow to be changed, or in an event where we need to make some changes for inclusiveness, but I would say for many more things, or in addition to inclusiveness. So I lost track of time, so I don't know whether I respected my time, but I think it could be enough. I think it could be enough to start to give some contribution to the discussion. So I would stop here if Daniele permits me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Maria Chiara. Actually, you raised so many issues. And one important thing I think that emerges from what you were saying is also that probably what we need, we as a world in international relations, is also a set of very basic shared rules that somehow should be respected by the different actors. But anyway, I don't want to take too much time from all your speakers. So let's turn to Gordon LaForge. I already introduced him briefly before. Let me just add that he has worked on some case studies on the consequences of COVID-19, and that he contributes to some journals like Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, the Washington Quarterly, the Daily Beast. Please, Gordon, and welcome again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Fiorentino. It's very good to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about something that Professor Malaguti was touching on, which is kind of the other actors that get involved in the international system. I think Professor Fiorentino did an excellent job of framing all the different dimensions in which we can think about the issue of inclusiveness in the international system. And so I'm going to focus on just one aspect of that. So to start, it's helpful to think about what we are talking about specifically when we talk about the international system. I'm going to focus on the international liberal order. So the collection of institutions, agreements, and alliances that were established after World War II that were designed to promote security and global economic development. So this is the UN, NATO, IMF, World Bank, expanded to include the World Trade Organization and others. It is decidedly liberal in character, advancing certain values of democratic participation and economic openness. As Professor Malaguti was pointing out, that the system is under threat. There's wide agreement that it's insufficient for the job at hand. One, there are increasing illiberal strains that are present in a lot of countries that are key members of it. The United States, where I am, was perhaps the biggest villain in this sense during the Donald Trump era. But more importantly, I think that the system is atrophied, that it's incapable of mustering the kind of cooperation needed to handle the complex problems we face as a planet. The pandemic is the best example of this, and then climate change. So I think the fundamental issue with the international order is that it was designed for a very different time, and that the world is much more different than it was back when the order was developed. Global travel is easier than ever. People go all over the world. World trade as a percentage of GDP is double what it was in 1975. And communications and information have been revolutionized by the internet. I mean, in 1995, there were only 16 million people on the internet. Today, there are 5 billion people connecting with each other, understanding, having visibility of what is going on all over the world. So the system is much different today. The world is much different. Technological and economic developments have reshaped the world, but the institution.
I don't know the others, but I cannot hear Gordon anymore. Gordon?
No,
Hello?
I can't hear.
I think you have a problem with the connection.
I think
Gordon, can you hear me?
I'm sorry. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you, but for a short time, I would say about a minute, your connection went off. So we couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh no. Okay. How about now? Are we okay?
Yeah.
Maybe
yeah,
I'll back up 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, poor connection, I guess.
Yeah.
So my main point is just that the international institutions have not kept pace with the pace of technological and economic change in the world. So we need to update the technology of global governance for the 21st century. And I think the best way to do this is to make the international order more inclusive in a particular sense. One, we need to change our understanding of what we mean when we talk about the international system. Usually we've thought of it just in terms of nation states. Even the word international is internations, among nations. But as Professor Malaguti was pointing out, today, global affairs are conducted by a much greater variety of actors than just nation states. Power used to be more concentrated in states. It is much more diffuse now. Diplomacy and information gathering used to just be done by embassies and governments. Now there are global foundations, NGOs, corporations, universities, media organizations, many others that are very connected to what's going on in foreign countries. Subnational governments are more important, mayors and governors. For example, cities account for 70% of total carbon emissions in the world. And the mayors that run these cities are connecting with each other and thinking about how they can meet climate targets independent of their national governments. So when you start to look for it, you see examples of this kind of cooperation going on outside of states everywhere, all over the world. My main argument is that we should incorporate all of those actors and all that activity into the international order in a more purposeful way. So what this means is expanding the international order, not out necessarily to include more states, but deeper into societies. So involving all the global actors that are participating in problem solving and global affairs in a more structured and purposeful way. One way that you could do this, you start to think of what are the specific proposals for how you could update it. One is that you could have different hubs organized around sustainable development goals that bring together the international organizations that work on those particular goals, maybe a UN agency, and then you intentionally bring in private actors, civil society groups, other organizations that work on those particular problems and bring it all together. A great example of this is Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. It provides a kind of model of public-private civil society partnership. It is an alliance of governments, foundations, businesses, and international organizations, such as the World Health Organization. It has been leading the global COVID-19 vaccine delivery for children worldwide.
Okay. Are you speaking?
Okay.
Gordon?
Yeah, sorry, the connection is not
yeah,
good.
Now and then the connection gives out. So speak up again. Maybe now.
Okay.
Now
sorry
you're
about
back.
this.
Yeah, now you're back. Okay.
Okay. I'm close to wrapping up, and then I'll try to relocate somewhere where I have more connectivity. But so I'll just make the final point that I think it's very urgent.
We lost you again. Hello. We're losing you again. We can't hear.
We have in the planet. We need to make the order more.
Gordon, we've missed most of what you've said. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. How about now?
You were wrapping up, and then we lost you. So you announced that you would wrap up, and now
okay.
Maybe.
So
very briefly, so that we catch the the core of your conclusion, and then okay, go ahead.
Yes. Sorry. Okay. So the last point I'll just make is that it's not realistic to make these changes right now. There's no appetite in the US, the UK, Western Europe for more international engagement, more inclusivity. But we need to start building momentum now, and we need to start preparing the ideas now for when the opportunity for updating the system will arise. I'll stop. Sorry about the connectivity for now. Leave it there for now.
It's okay, Gordon. Thank you. It's understandable. I mean, despite all the high technology we now have at hand, then in the end, it's always, not so reliable as one would wish. So anyway, thank you for a very interesting and exhaustive picture, let's say. I mean, a complete picture of what it's in store, I would say. I mean, we are speaking about the future, of course, and we can only guess, make questions, raise issues, but and doubts, and discuss about what's in store. Let's turn to Marilena Gala, who, by the way, is a colleague and friend at the University of Roma Tre. She's been also a fellow, a policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center twice, and she's one of the teachers in the Nuclear Boot Camp, which is a summer school within the nuclear proliferation. Sorry, international.
No proliferation.
No proliferation. Yeah, that's right. Of course.
Hopefully, no proliferation.
Sure enough. She recently published an article in Cold War History on the weaknesses of the December 1917 agreement. And please, Marilena, I won't take any other time from you. Okay. And then when you'll be through, I will disconnect, and you will take over the coordination of this meeting. Okay, please.
Okay, thank you, Daniele. Very briefly, actually, because all my colleagues who spoke before me already touched upon some of the crucial issues I was focusing while I was reflecting on how to deal with this big topic of our conversation today. Just to link to what first Maria Chiara and then Gordon were saying, and first of all, I mean the outline of the big challenge we have ahead, made by Daniele. I just would like to focus a little bit on political leadership. Because whenever we talk about inclusiveness of the international system, we talk about a vision of the international system. Now, in order to develop a vision of the international system and then to try to implement, to fulfill to some extent commitment to implement that vision, we definitely need political leadership. Leaders need to develop a vision, to share a vision with other leaders and with public opinion, convince other leaders and convince public opinion to support, to advocate that vision, and then to transform a vision in something which can be considered the real system, like institutions, rules of the game, and so on and so forth. Now, how to hope for a more inclusive international system, which is desperately needed at this time of our life, because of the huge challenges looming ahead. We know, we just mentioned some of them. We constantly live with the threat of something wrong happening around us, because I mean I'm a sort of I don't want to say an expert of security, because there are so many different aspects of security that you can be an expert in just one of them and not pretending to be an expert on a huge range of security challenges. But it's clear that we constantly feel threatened by a danger looming ahead, starting with the pandemic and then the climate change. Whenever it starts raining, we never know what will happen later on. Now, it's true that a more inclusive international system, as Gordon was explaining, is desperately needed right now. Because you need to address this problem. You need to tackle this problem involving, creating cohesion and a common vision, because you need the help of every single state, every single NGO, every single expert in a certain field. But so far, at least, the way we are as human beings organized as a community has always implied the capability of exerting some political leadership. And so to guide the world, to guide a nation, to guide a community toward a specific purpose, a specific goal. If I look at the leadership, the political leadership we have nowadays, wherever I look at, I see in the best of the situation weak political leadership. Politicians most of the time are inward looking, so obsessed with their own constituencies. They are not really eager to develop a common vision. Just because nationalism is emerging as a dominant dimension at the international level, I don't want to strike for sure just a negative chord, but I think that we have to take this into account if we want to understand how can be possible to, or to what extent can it be possible to have a more inclusive international system? And there is another aspect that, in my opinion, is extremely relevant, is the aspect of the pace of transformation, the pace of evolution, starting with technology, for example. Now, whenever you try to develop a vision, and so to indicate what's the goal, what's the grand strategy, you need to know what you are talking about. How can we expect that political leadership, even in the best cases, can become really capable of developing a vision once they barely understand, we all barely understand, or we barely catch up with the pace of the transformation we are dealing with? And so this is also linked to another aspect which contributes to making our political leadership in the Western, but also outside of the Western world, rather weak, is the question of representation. There are so many other players at the international level, as Gordon was highlighting, that attempt and sometimes succeed to represent specific instances, specific issues better than often do national governments. So in order to have a more inclusive international system, we need, and in this I totally agree with what Gordon was saying, we need to think differently from we have done in the past. But the real challenge is to know what are the challenges ahead of us. Because without knowing that, it's extremely difficult to develop any vision of how to share rules, how to transform international institutions, so on and so forth. And I will stop here. Now, as I'm also the moderator of this,
thank you, Marilena. Sorry. Thank you. I'm still here, but I'm going in a few minutes.
I don't want to start
with everybody, but the floor is yours. Thank you again, Maria Chiara and Gordon. And I'm sorry, but these are the duties of a department chair. I'm switching to another meeting now. So,
thank you, Daniele.
Thank you again.
Bye. Thank you, Daniele.
Bye-bye.
So, as I was saying, now I'm the moderator, so I'd like to hear from, there is a very short, small group of people still attending the meeting, but I would like to know if there is anything that the other speakers or from the audience, there is any question, any comment, anything that you want to share with us, to say?
I do, but I think I will give the priority of anyone who did not speak yet. So if there is no one else, I will take the floor for a moment.
Any question from the students?
I think that you can go ahead, Maria Chiara.
Yeah, no, first of all, with a question, I must say, because it was extremely interesting what both of you said, and it really, you said things that I tried to understand and consider for long. One of my first issues was I'm quite triggered from your arguments on political leadership, but my question for quite a number of years was where the political leadership lie right now. Where does it stand at international level? I mean, of course, if we speak of leaders of states, it's easy to say. But what I see is that there are other forms of leadership which have always been other forms of leadership or ways to influence the arena, let's say. In the past, it was probably easier to identify where these powers or these communities were. Now is a bit more difficult because, it's true, you have the ONG, you have all the logic of think tanks, that they spread around understanding or messages, but it is extremely difficult for me. My question has always been, where exactly political leadership lie now? Because this is linked to what Gordon was saying, which is indeed now actors are many more than in the past. And for what I see normally, I would say that even the real actors are outside the political arena, in the sense that, of course, at the very end, what you need is head of states that sit together. But before getting to head of states sitting together, you have many other things that happen where countries intervene with a different role, where they do speak more. And I'm not saying this because I'm president of UNIDROIT, but when you sit into negotiation, but really, if you think, when you sit in negotiation at UNIDROIT or UNCITRAL or this kind of bodies where you discuss technical issues, where the political aspect is extremely relevant, but it doesn't appear so evident as when you speak of terrorism or immigration. People really collaborate. It is much more inclusive. Or in any event, you have a number of conflicts that are extremely relevant in my understanding, but they do not surface, So over there, you really have another way of doing multilateralism, and people somehow don't give the right don't see the importance of that kind of negotiations. So there are a lot of things that do not emerge, but are really governance, and they include for many in many cases the private sector, meaning everything. Private sector might mean a lot of things, but there is really a lot that would need to be taken into consideration when we speak of governance and when we speak of inclusiveness, because it's sometimes inclusiveness is given or it's granted much more by the private sector than the public sector, And I think it's fascinating, but it's really the issue, of trying to think under different parameters. And it's under law, it's out of question because, you study in international law, the first thing they tell you, of course, that international law exists because states exist. If you don't have states, you don't even have international law. All the conceptual logic starts from this, and the fact that solidarity is a solidarity within the community you belong. So, and everything else is aid, is not, or cooperation, is not solidarity in the sense, of really sharing interest. So it was supposed to be a question. So it was a bit long, but it was supposed to be a question on leadership, really.
I will try to respond, although I don't have a real response to your question, but then I'd like also to listen to what Gordon has to say about that. Where political leadership lies, actually, it's a matter of convention. We have to decide where it is, to some extent at least. And that's why I was also mentioning the problem of representation. how you decide which is the best way to have different interests represented at the political level, where grand strategy, where the goal, the general goal for the national or international community is decided. That's a big issue, of course, and that's a big issue also because our societies are in the process of a huge transformation because of technology as well. I mean, every single country, not just in the Western world, but all over the world, every single country is experiencing in a different way, according to the different regime of the different political system, the consequences of the transformation of society because of the different way of communication, the problems related to how can you inform people. And so how can you gain legitimacy as a political leadership is one of the crucial issues. And this is true at the national as well as at the international level. So representation also at the international level is the crucial note to cut. But how do that? That's a real big problem. Gordon, I don't know what you think about that.
I think this is an incredibly important point. Representation and legitimacy, it's at the heart of the ability of the institutions and the system to be able to function and actually function meaningfully. And so far, we've been speaking on the level of organization and institution. But I think part of this is thinking about the actual people who are in these positions of leadership and who are doing the work that these institutions do. And I think those people who are in these positions of power must also, we need more diversity and more inclusion in these, in the people who have these roles. I'm talking about, gender diversity. We need more women in these positions. We need more ethnic diversity. And we need more, I think, diversity in academic backgrounds and occupation. I think there are consequences to the fact, not to denigrate lawyers or the field of law, but most of the people who participate in the work of governance tend to come from a very narrow background of law. The system would be more creative and I think more nimble and better at problem solving if a wider range of backgrounds were more meaningfully represented. Scientists, people from the humanities even who were in these kind of positions. Not only is this important for legitimacy and representation, that these institutions actually better resemble the populations that they're supposed to be representing, but there's a lot of research that shows that more diverse and more diverse organizations are they're better at taking in new ideas. They're better at adapting. They're better at problem solving. So I think there's one, a legitimacy and representation argument, but then there's also the argument that they'll be more functional and more effective if they are more diverse.
How to get there? That's the real problem. How to get there? Who is in charge? We have nobody in charge. And one of the reasons why I think that the world is in such a bad shape is also because the United States just stopped to try to be in charge listening to other countries. Because, for quite a long time, I'm an expert in arms control, and I've always almost always worked on the Cold War era. And during the Cold War era, looking at documents, looking at the real discussions, you could see that at least towards allies, the United States were really listening, and they were molding their own posture, also according to what was suggested, what was asked by allies. Now, when you stop doing that, it's not that easy to recognize, for the rest of the world to recognize the role of leadership of the United States. And in that sense, the United States had also started feeling a sort of sense of isolation, so not being so fully supported anymore. And in that sense, I think that this is a real problem for the whole international system, not for saying that everything decided or everything proposed by the United States was right, but because that was the right method at that time. And the right method was to be in a room discussing together and working out a compromise. Without compromise, how can you put together so many different interests and instances? It's just impossible, I think. So this is at least a perspective from Europe.
I agree with that. And I think that, you know, to your original question of how to do it, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of political will right now to make these changes. Lots of the countries that steer the system are more inward looking and isolationist, unfortunately, which is tragic, because this is a moment in time when we need cooperation more than ever, given the challenges we face. I think it's still valuable to do this kind of work and think about how to prepare the ideas and prepare the proposals for when moments there is an opportunity to make some reforms and to make some changes, because that will come at some point. Usually it takes a tragedy or it takes a crisis that opens up space to create changes. You might think that the COVID-19 pandemic would be such a crisis, but I think the nature of it is different. It's kind of pushed the world in a less cooperative direction. However, there will come a crisis. It might be an event related to climate change, or a situation involving China, or any other number of things. And I think it's important that the world is ready at that time to implement the kind of reforms and updates that are needed.
No questions from the audience? No comments on that?
I think there's a comment from Flavia. Just a moment. Okay, thank you for this opportunity. At the beginning of the pandemic, the competition led to the refusal to sell medical supplies to countries in need. Can you read the Marilena?
Now, yes,
okay.
Yes, I can see. Okay. I was expecting a hand raised, so that's why I didn't pay attention to the chat.
Okay. Someone is writing, Flavia and Alessandro. Okay.
So the lack of solidarity will remain in the level indelible.
Okay.
In the memory of many people. Okay, it's really long. Sorry. Can you, Flavia? Sorry. Can you just open your microphone and speak up, please?
Maybe she's shy.
Don't be shy.
Okay, we can read if she doesn't want to.
So, okay.
Sorry,
okay,
because,
Flavia, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I'm with other students, so I didn't want to. I can read.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Take your question.
So I can read the chat.
Okay. Also, Alessandro.
Sorry, I have problems. Okay. Yeah. At the beginning of the pandemic, the competition led to the refusal to send medical supplies to countries in need. The lack of solidarity will remain in the memory of many people. Everyone wanted to defend their interests. In my opinion, the only future for a more inclusive international system is a united future. And what do you think about it?
Anyone wants to respond, or you prefer that we collect more than a question?
Maybe it's better.
Flavia, can I ask you, what do you mean by united future?
With a lot of solidarity and sharing points of proposal also for the I don't know. I mean, a vision for for the best. I can think about
vision of the future.
Also before you were saying about the important global problems, and without a shared vision, I can see how we can solve these problems, because everyone is always thinking about their interests, and so we know that money and grand world. So
okay, thank you. Now it's clearer. Now I have another question from Alessandro Diaz Gomez. I'm going to read it just because Alessandro is in the library, so cannot open the microphone. So this is for Gordon. You were mentioning Gavi Alliance as an example when you spoke about inclusion and convergence between different players, public and private in the specific case. I start from the premise that private players are often presented and perceived as mere benefactors. For example, Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation. So my question is, what are actually the interests, and if those interests are mere economic or strategic interests that lead a private organization to join the public, as in the specific case, to try to give an answer to problems of the time, such as that of vaccination on a global scale? I think there's a big confusion in this regard. Let's see if I can go on and read it. In this regard, where it is.
And we often see how this confusion creates conspiracy theories, for example, again to reenact the Bill Gates case. So it would be interesting to have an answer. Thank you.
Okay. So you want to start? Thanks.
Yes, Alessandro, that's a very good point, that a lot of these private foundations or corporations, when they are participating in providing global public goods, that's often met with skepticism by populations. Because as you said, what are their private interests? These are private actors that are participating. And in many cases, I think in the case of the Gates Foundation, there is a genuine interest in supporting global public health. And the record shows that the foundation has done an excellent job of vaccinating a lot of children around the world and being committed to helping global public health. But I think there's two issues. One, the fundamental issue is that it is problematic that a lot of the work that should be done by governments, that is public work, is being done right now by private entities like foundations and like corporations. And I think this is extremely pronounced in the United States, where over the past few decades, the public sector has been eroded and defunded, and corporations and foundations have stepped in to do some of the work that should be done by governments with public investment and public support. This is a much bigger problem that requires a lot of policy changes in the United States to address, and I don't think will be addressed meaningfully in the short term, that this is a kind of a big shift that needs to occur to strengthen the public sector overall. So in the short term, what can you do? And I think Gavi is a very good example and has avoided some of the challenges of conspiracy and lack of legitimacy that, for instance, the Gates Foundation by itself faces. And that's because it partners with governments and it has these other organizations that are at its core, such as the World Health Organization. So that helps give it legitimacy. These established public organizations that people know and to differing degrees trust, or might trust more than a corporation or a private foundation, they are able then to add legitimacy to the enterprise. So I think partnerships are extremely important when we have private companies and private foundations that are doing the work that governments really should be doing on their own.
Okay, I see that Flavia was just saying that, yeah, she was in the library too, so that's why she didn't. She was reluctant to talk. I don't know if you, Gordon, you want to say anything else and address or respond, try to respond to the issue raised by Flavia, or you, Maria Chiara?
I could just say briefly that I think what Flavia is pointing to is the vision of thinking of a more united globe and a more united humanity. And I think there's been an evolution throughout human history of people thinking of themselves as connected to greater and greater organizations and networks of other people. You think all the way back, it started with tribe, and then people thought of themselves as connected to their town or their city. And then we got nation states. People think of themselves as connected to other people in the same nation as them. I live in the United States and there are 330 million people here, and I know very few of them, but I still feel connected to other people who are in the country. And I think the next step in that evolution is for us to really think of ourselves as part of humanity overall, globally. And I think this change is happening. I think it's happening slowly, but I think especially young generations today who have more exposure to other cultures because of the internet and because of travel and because of educational exchange, we think of ourselves more as part of a global community. And we think of our connections to others in our generation who live in Europe, in my case, in Europe or Asia or Africa. So I think this shift is happening, but it takes time. And only after this change happens of how we see ourselves in relation to others on the planet will we have the kind of institutions and government system that reflects that.
Yeah, and just let me say that in being part of the educational system, I think that we should really feel the responsibility to spread this message that, we are part of a huge community, and we are not just in the right, entitled to focus on our local, small local world, because it doesn't work. We are too linked together in this small planet. So, and this is something that I constantly feel the responsibility to highlight in a way. Any other question, any other comment?
No, if I can only add one small thing, that I think that, all of this clashes with the fact that institutions by themselves are not really coping with all of this. The real thing, one of the issues is that indeed, when I think Flavia was saying that the communities were stopping goods, or they were using vaccines or whatever for their own communities, it's, somehow the way the world is organized permits you to do so. So in terms of institutions, in terms of legal systems, in terms of the way the world is organized, you are legitimate to do so, in the sense that, again, I pay taxes. I pay taxes to send you, Flavia, to school, not to send to school someone who was born in Georgia, just to say what, because this is the way the world is organized, So you have to find, also to change the institutions or to change the rules of the game. It can't only be the way you communicate things or the way you perceive things. You also need to change the institutions, which doesn't mean to disregard all what has been done until now. You build upon history, of course, but you do change. It is a time to really change the rules of the game. Without getting into this utopian consideration, I mean, you need to use common sense and really understanding the needs of people in order to see how you can change the structure of the institutions. But I think, really what happened in the pandemic showed, because, many governments did what the law permitted them to do, So they were not doing anything against the law. They were doing something perfectly legitimate. That is the issue, The issue is you have to try to change the institutions, but the institutions always come after the understanding of people. They're always arriving late. I always say, lawyers, because it's true that institutions come basically for the most for lawyers, are always behind. They arrive and take a picture of the reality when the reality has already changed. It's always, that is an issue, but I mean.
Marilena, we can't hear you. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot. I closed my mic. I was just saying that just thinking about Europe is just a perfect example of how long it takes for changing the rules of the game, and I think that Europe, in that sense, is the one of the very few positive examples of how to react to pandemic. Now we have to see what will happen, in the future. But at least it was demonstrating to be able to understand that was a turning moment. And a turning moment for changing the narrative about Europe and the necessity of European Union. Now, let's hope for the best, but I mean, at least that was a good example of what Maria Chiara was suggesting, the attention of the rules. So you abide by the rules, and if you change the rules, you can also stimulate an evolution in the right sense.
No questions anymore. Okay. I think. Okay.
So I think that we can just say thank you to our guests and to our students. And thank you again, Maria Chiara and Gordon, for being here. Hopefully we will have other chances in the future to do something together. So thanks again, and have a nice evening or day.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Ciao.